How can one casual touch during a harmless group video unravel an entire relationship? Why does a man stay silent when everyone else laughs, only to respond with calm precision weeks later? Can a woman still call it nothing when the evidence lands in her own hands? Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Mariel, and I swear I didn't mean for things to go this far. It started as a small, harmless moment during a team video at work. Everyone laughing, cheering, being silly. Jared, a coworker, put his arm around me for half a second while the camera rolled. It was nothing. At least that's what I kept saying. But somehow, that short clip turned into the spark that burned everything down. My boyfriend, Evan, didn't yell, didn't accuse me, didn't even fight. He just went quiet. You'd think silence means forgiveness, but it doesn't. It means distance. And every day after that, the distance got wider. Separate mugs, separate rooms, separate lives. I told everyone he was being controlling, that he couldn't handle a confident woman. They believed me. I almost believed it too. But then things started happening that I couldn't explain. Files disappearing, calendar reminders on his phone, late-night printer sounds. By the time I realized what was coming, it was too late. Everyone saw the video. Everyone laughed. And when he finally acted, he didn't raise his voice. He just handed me the truth, written on paper, signed and sealed. Maybe I should start with the video, because that's where everything began. 30 seconds of laughter that somehow turned into a whole relationship unraveling. It was a Friday afternoon, one of those loud end-of-week moods when everyone in the office forgets about deadlines and pretends we're part of a sitcom instead of a company drowning in spreadsheets. Our manager said we should record a fun team culture video for social media. I rolled my eyes, but of course I joined. Everyone did. We crowded near the break area with our paper cups and fake enthusiasm. Someone hit record, and there I was, smiling, tossing my hair, saying something clever about the dream team. Jared was standing beside me. He's one of those guys who can get away with anything because he says everything with a grin. Just as the camera panned to us, he threw his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. It was quick, harmless, not even worth a second thought. At least that's what I told myself when I saw Evan's name flash on my phone a few minutes later. I ignored it. I was still basking in that little buzz you get from being seen. That night, the video went up on our company page. The comments poured in. People said we looked like a fun group. Someone joked that Jared and I had main character energy. I hit like on that one. It felt good, like proof I wasn't just another face behind a desk. When Evan came home, I showed him the clip. I thought he'd laugh. Instead, he watched it once. Then again, slower. He didn't say anything. He just placed my phone face down on the counter and said he was going to shower. I followed him, asking if he was serious. He said quietly that it looked like more than team spirit. I told him he was being dramatic, that everyone was just messing around. He didn't argue. He just said, "You should know how it looks." I told him he needed to learn how to relax, that not every man putting an arm around a woman meant something. He nodded, turned off the bathroom light, and said he was tired. I remember feeling insulted, not guilty, just insulted that he wouldn't even fight. The next morning, the kitchen felt too neat. 2 mugs on the counter, his spotless, mine half full, coffee cold. He'd already left for work. I checked my phone. The video had been reshared by a few of my friends from college, and the comments were even bolder now. "That guy's cute. Your boyfriend better watch out." I laughed at those, screenshot a few, and sent them to my group chat with a joke about how Evan was already jealous. My friend Cara replied with a dozen laughing emojis and said I was too much. I told her I was just being real. Later that day, Evan texted, asking if I'd be home for dinner. I said maybe, We were doing an after-work hangout for the video launch. He replied, "Okay." No emoji, no punctuation beyond that single word. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Then I tucked my phone away and told myself he was sulking because he didn't like sharing attention. At the office happy hour, Jared ordered drinks for everyone. He teased me about being famous now that the clip had gone semi-viral on LinkedIn. The bartender laughed when Jared called me the office star. It wasn't flirting, not really, but I could feel eyes on us. I let them look. I even leaned closer, so the next photo someone took would look good. When I got home past 10, Evan was on the couch, TV on mute, laptop open. He looked up once, said, "You had fun?" I said yes, and added that it was just work. He nodded, closed the laptop, and said he was glad I was enjoying myself. The tone wasn't sarcastic, but it didn't sound warm either. That night, I scrolled through the comments again while he brushed his teeth. There was one I didn't like, some stranger writing "cute couple." I deleted it. I don't even know why. Maybe I didn't want him to see. The next few days, small things started to shift. He began waking up earlier, leaving before I did. When I asked why, he said he had errands. His phone alarm had new labels. Paper drop, downtown 11:30. Once, I saw a sticky note on his desk that said, "Bring forms." I joked about him running for office. He just smiled faintly and said something about needing to get organized. One night, while I was watching TV, I heard a faint clicking sound from the guest room. I peeked in and saw him closing the drawer of an old filing cabinet. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was sorting old receipts. I said nobody organizes receipts at midnight. He shrugged and said, "Some of us sleep better with order." I laughed, but he didn't. I started calling Cara more, venting about how Evan was acting cold. She said maybe he was embarrassed by the video and needed reassurance. I said he should be the one reassuring me, since he was the one overreacting. That sounded right at the time, even though my voice shook a little when I said it. A week later, I came home to find a faint smell of toner in the air. The printer light was blinking. When I lifted the top, a single blank page sat there. I called out for him, but he wasn't home. On his desk, a small folder sat partly open, labeled Utilities. I rolled my eyes. Who labels household bills like that? Still, I closed it carefully and pretended not to notice the envelope underneath marked with a date. That weekend, we went to brunch with my sister Tessa. She adores Evan, which annoys me sometimes. She asked if everything was fine between us. I said of course it was, that Evan just needed to lighten up. She said, "You know, he really loves you. He just doesn't like being made a joke." I said nobody was laughing at him, just at the situation. She didn't argue, just gave me that look older sisters give when they've already made up their minds. After brunch, Evan drove in silence. I filled the quiet with small talk, mentioning how people at work still teased me about the video. I said it was kind of flattering that it got so many views. He said, "Attention doesn't mean respect." I said, "Respect follows results," and I had results. He didn't answer. When we got home, he carried his jacket into the guest room instead of hanging it in the hallway. I followed, asking if he was seriously planning to sleep there. He said he needed space to think. I told him that was ridiculous, that he was making a small thing into a crisis. He said, "It's already a crisis, you just don't see it yet." That night, I sat in the dark living room scrolling through the video one last time. It still looked harmless to me. Just laughter, a friendly arm, a moment. But something about the quiet of the apartment made me uneasy. From the guest room, I heard the faint hum of the shredder. Then silence. I turned up the volume on my phone to drown it out, but the laughter in the clip suddenly sounded fake, sharp around the edges, like the sound was cutting itself short. I paused it and looked toward the hallway, half expecting him to appear. He didn't. The printer beeped once, then stopped. I told myself everything would blow over soon. That's what always happened. He'd cool off, realize he'd overreacted, and things would go back to normal. Still, when I walked past his desk later, I noticed his calendar open to next week. There was a new entry, written neatly in black ink, meeting, personal. I closed the planner, turned off the light, and went to bed pretending not to feel what I already knew, that something had shifted for good, and I had no idea how to shift it back. By the time Monday came, people at the office were still talking about the video. It was strange how fast a tiny moment could turn into something everyone knew about. Our marketing team decided to repost it on the company's LinkedIn page, and now I was the girl in the fun video. Colleagues kept teasing me in the hall, saying things like, "You and Jared make a great team." I laughed along, pretending I wasn't secretly enjoying the attention. It felt nice to be noticed for something other than spreadsheets and invoices. When I got home that night, Evan was already there. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, typing quietly. I told him about the video being shared again. He didn't look up. He said he'd seen it already. I asked what he thought. He said it didn't matter what he thought. That annoyed me. I told him he was being dramatic. He said he didn't like being made a joke. I said no one was laughing at him. They were laughing with me. He looked at me for a long time, then went back to his laptop. I went to the bedroom and scrolled through my phone, trying to shake off the weird tension. My coworkers had tagged me in a post with a laughing emoji. Someone had commented, "Her boyfriend must be jealous." I liked the comment, then immediately unliked it, worried Evan might see. I told myself I was just being considerate, not sneaky. The next evening, I went out for drinks with my coworkers to celebrate hitting our sales target. Jared was there, as usual, holding court with his easy jokes. I told him people were still talking about the video, and he grinned. He said, "Well, maybe we should give them something new to talk about." Everyone laughed, but I noticed a woman from HR looking at us a little too long. I brushed it off. We took a few group selfies. In one of them, Jared leaned close to me again, pretending to whisper something funny. I laughed too loud on purpose. It felt like a performance, and I was good at performing. When I got home, Evan was awake on the couch. The lights were off except for the faint glow from the TV. He didn't ask how the night went, just muted the sound when I walked in. I said, "You could at least ask if I had fun." He said, "You always do." I said he could stop being sarcastic. He said he wasn't. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, that tight anger that comes from someone refusing to play along with your script. I told him I didn't like being treated like a villain. He said, "Then stop acting like one." That shut me up for a minute. I went to bed without saying another word. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. For a second, I thought he was making peace. But when I walked into the kitchen, he was already leaving for work. 2 mugs on the counter again, his spotless, mine cold. He said something about needing to stop by the bank. I asked if everything was okay. He said, "Just taking care of things." His calmness made me more nervous than anger ever could. At work, things got louder. People were tagging me in memes now, little jokes about the office couple. One said, "HR's favorite power duo." I laughed at first, but it started feeling uncomfortable. Jared seemed to enjoy it, though. He said, "At least they notice us." I said, "It's kind of awkward." He smirked and said, "Only if you make it awkward." That line stuck in my head the rest of the day. Later that week, my manager called me into her office. She said there had been some talk about boundaries. I asked if I was in trouble. She said no, just a reminder that workplace relationships could create tension. I told her Jared and I weren't anything. She nodded politely but didn't look convinced. When I left the room, I saw Jared at his desk pretending not to notice me. That night, I vented to Kara over text. She said Evan must have complained. I said he wouldn't dare. She sent a voice note saying, "You should post a cute pic of you and Jared. Show them you're unbothered." It sounded tempting. I didn't, though. I just scrolled through my feed until I saw a new post from Evan's account, something rare for him. A quiet photo of the sunrise, with the caption, "Clarity comes when you stop explaining yourself." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't know if it was about me, but it felt like it. The next weekend, my sister invited us to a small rooftop party. I said yes without asking Evan first, assuming he wouldn't come. But he surprised me by showing up, dressed neatly, polite smile fixed on his face. Everyone commented on how calm and collected he seemed. That should have made me happy, but instead, it made me feel small, like he was performing stability just to contrast my chaos. When someone brought up the video again, I rolled my eyes and said, "Please, it was nothing." One of our friends laughed and said, "Evan probably still hates Jared." I looked at him, expecting him to deny it. He didn't. He just said, "I don't hate anyone. Some lessons teach themselves." Everyone laughed, but I felt the blood rush to my face. On the drive home, I told him he embarrassed me. He said, "I wasn't trying to." I said he could have defended me. He said, "I don't need to defend what's already public." I said that made no sense. He said, "Exactly." The rest of the ride was silent except for the turn signal clicking. When we got home, I noticed something new, a neat folder on the desk labeled "Household." I asked if he was reorganizing bills again. He said yes, just keeping things in order. I said it was obsessive. He said, "No, it's preparation." I laughed and asked, "For what?" He didn't answer. Later that week, I caught him printing something late at night. The sound woke me up. When I walked in, he was removing papers from the tray. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Finishing some paperwork." I told him it was almost midnight. He said, "Some things are better done quietly." At work the next morning, Jared asked why I looked tired. I told him I was fine. He said I needed to loosen up, then asked if I was coming to Friday's karaoke night. I said maybe. That night, I told Evan about it, expecting him to roll his eyes. Instead, he said, "You should go. People like seeing you happy." I didn't know how to respond to that. Friday came, and I did go. I sang badly, laughed too loud, stayed out too late. Jared kept his distance most of the night, but when someone shouted for a group selfie, he leaned in again, one arm over my shoulder, same as before. The flash went off. Everyone cheered. For a split second, I thought, here we go again. When I got home, Evan was asleep, or pretending to be. I placed my phone on the nightstand face down. The next morning, it was gone. I found it later on the kitchen counter, unplugged, with the battery drained. I asked if he'd touched it. He said, "Why would I?" I started feeling watched, even when he wasn't home. Little things kept changing. The car keys moved, the printer light blinking when I hadn't used it, the faint click of a locked drawer. One afternoon, I opened his laptop while he was showering. The screen was on a spreadsheet, rows and columns labeled with dates, expenses, notes. My name appeared several times. I closed it quickly, heart racing. That night, I asked if we were okay. He said, "We're fine." I asked if he still loved me. He said, "Love isn't the problem." I said, "Then what is?" He said, "Trust." I tried to laugh it off, saying he was being paranoid. He just looked at me and said, "I'm not the one who needs to worry." I didn't sleep much after that. Every sound in the apartment felt too sharp. The hum of the fridge, the whir of the printer, the beep of his phone alarm at 11:30 p.m. I told myself he was just being organized, just coping. But deep down, I felt the floor shifting under me, and I didn't know why. When Monday came, a new post appeared on the company page. Our karaoke photo. Jared's arm again, my smile too wide. Within minutes, the comments rolled in. "Déjà vu. She's at it again. Guess the boyfriend's still a saint." I felt sick. My phone buzzed with messages from Cara, from Tessa, even from my manager, asking if I wanted the post taken down. I texted Evan, trying to get ahead of it. I said, Just FYI, people are overreacting again. It's not a big deal. He didn't reply. When I got home, the apartment was spotless. His laptop was gone. On the counter sat his mug, perfectly clean, beside mine half full of cold coffee. And taped to the fridge, one small, sticky note. Some things explain themselves. The morning after I found the sticky note, I woke up to a strange silence. No hum from the coffee machine, no faint music from the guest room, just still air. Evan's shoes were gone from the entryway. I checked my phone. No message, no missed call. I told myself he'd just left early for work again, but the pit in my stomach didn't believe it. At the office, everything felt louder than usual. People were whispering when I walked in. Jared wouldn't meet my eyes. When I asked what was going on, one of the reception girls finally told me. Apparently, someone had emailed the HR department screenshots of the karaoke photo thread, along with a few older comments from the original office video. She said HR was reviewing potential misconduct. I laughed, pretending not to care, but my hands were shaking. By noon, HR called me in. They said they weren't accusing anyone of anything yet, but they needed to discuss professionalism and perception. I said perception was their problem, not mine. The woman interviewing me smiled politely and asked if my boyfriend was aware of my public persona. I asked what she meant. She turned her monitor toward me. Someone had uploaded a meme using my picture from karaoke. Me laughing with Jared's arm around me, captioned, "Some people never learn." I felt my face burning. I said that wasn't company business. She said it became company business when employees were involved. I told her it was clearly a joke. She said the internet rarely jokes kindly. When I got home that night, Evan's car was in the driveway, but the lights were off. I found him in the guest room, packing a small box. I asked if he was moving out. He said he was just organizing things for storage. I said it looked like leaving. He said maybe it was both. I told him he was acting cold, cruel even. He said, "Cruelty usually needs noise." I haven't raised my voice once. That line stung in a way I couldn't explain. I followed him into the kitchen, trying to make him fight, to make him react. He didn't. He just wiped the counter, placed his mug upside down again, and asked if I'd eaten. I told him to stop pretending everything was normal. He said, "It is, just not the kind you want." Then he walked out. That weekend, I met up with Kara at a rooftop bar. I needed to vent. I told her about HR, about the meme, about Evan's distance. She said, "Girl, he's obviously planning something. You better fix the narrative first." I asked what she meant. She said, "Go public, post something sweet, make people see you as the victim before he does." It sounded ridiculous, but I half listened, so I posted an old photo of us, me and Evan at the lake last summer, smiling. I captioned it, "Some things are worth fighting for." Within minutes, people commented heart emojis. It made me feel like maybe I could steer this story back towards sympathy. But 2 hours later, Evan texted, "Delete that." I asked why. He said, "You don't get to use me for PR." I told him he was overthinking. He didn't answer. When I got home that night, his side of the bed was stripped clean. He was asleep, or pretending, in the guest room again. On his nightstand sat a folder labeled Archive A. I didn't open it, but I memorized the title. The next day, my sister Tessa came over unannounced. She said she was worried. She had talked to Evan's mother, who mentioned changes being made. I laughed it off, saying Janine always dramatized everything. Tessa didn't smile. She asked if I'd done anything that might make Evan pull away. I said no, unless being fun counted as a crime. She sighed and said, "Fun isn't supposed to humiliate someone." That word, humiliate, set me off. I told her Evan had made himself miserable, that I wasn't responsible for his pride. She didn't argue, but she looked disappointed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard a faint beep, like a recording app stopping. I sat up, listening. The The sound came from the guest room. When I opened the door, Evan was at his desk, typing on his laptop. I asked if he was recording me. He said no, but his tone didn't sound convincing. I told him it was invasive. He said, "You never minded an audience before." I slammed the door and spent the rest of the night scrolling through old messages with Jared, deleting anything that looked remotely flirty. I didn't want more screenshots floating around. The next morning, HR emailed me again. They said the issue had been resolved internally, but reminded me to be mindful of public image. I told myself that meant it was over. Still, when I logged into my work account, Jared's name was gone from the company directory. At lunch, Cara called, saying Jared had been let go. I pretended to be shocked. She said the rumor was that Evan had sent an anonymous complaint. I laughed, but the sound came out brittle. Could he really do that? He barely even used social media. But then I remembered his folders, his notes, his calm. Maybe he didn't need the internet. Maybe he had proof. That evening, I decided to confront him. He was sitting at the table, phone face down, a stack of papers beside him. I said, "Did you get Jared fired?" He said, "Jared got Jared fired." I told him he was petty. He said, "No, just thorough." I demanded to know what he was planning. He said, "You'll see when it's time." Something in me cracked then. I shouted that he was manipulative, that he wanted to make me look crazy. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He just said, "You don't need my help for that." The next day, Tessa texted asking if I was okay. She said Evan had been meeting with someone downtown. I asked who. She didn't know. My stomach tightened. I drove past his office at lunch, but his car wasn't there. That weekend, I tried to fix things the only way I knew, by pretending everything was fine. I invited friends over for dinner, made sure the house looked perfect. Evan came home halfway through, greeted everyone politely, and joined the conversation like nothing was wrong. My friends kept giving me looks, the kind you give when you sense tension under the surface. During dessert, someone brought up the viral posts again. One guy joked that Evan deserved a medal for surviving me. Everyone laughed, but Evan didn't. He just smiled faintly and said, "She's unforgettable, that's true." The way he said it made everyone quiet for a second before the laughter picked up again. After they left, I told him he was cruel for embarrassing me. He said, "I didn't embarrass you. You've done a thorough job yourself." I said he was trying to destroy my reputation. He said, "No, I'm just letting your words travel on their own." That night, when I passed the guest room, the door was open. On the desk, I saw a USB drive taped under a folder marked taxes. My hand hovered over it, but I didn't touch it. I didn't want to know. The next morning, the car keys were missing again, and his side of the closet looked thinner. My chest tightened, but I refused to admit fear. Instead, I told myself I'd win him back somehow. Maybe if I acted sweet, reminded him of the girl he fell for. I made breakfast, his favorite, eggs, toast, the good coffee. When he walked in, he thanked me politely, but didn't sit. I said, "You can't keep punishing me for one mistake." He said, "You still think it was one." Then he picked up his briefcase and left. As soon as the door closed, I felt that heavy silence again. I turned on the TV for background noise, but every commercial seemed to echo what I didn't want to hear. Voices talking about reputation, choices, consequences. I went to the window and saw him drive off toward downtown. The same direction as his calendar reminders. The same place he always had those personal meetings. I told myself he was bluffing, that he'd never actually do anything permanent. He wasn't the type. He was too calm, too logical. But calm can be dangerous when it's patient. By evening, I realized he hadn't come home. I texted him once, twice, 3 times. No reply. I called Tessa. She said, "Mariel, if he's gone quiet, it means he's already decided." I wanted to argue, but all that came out was a whisper. "Decided what?" She didn't answer. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the karaoke photo in my mind. The angle, the smile, Jared's hand, the flash. 30 seconds of noise that had turned into weeks of silence. And somewhere between those two extremes, my life had started to come apart piece by piece, while he quietly built something I still couldn't see. Sunday morning came with sunlight that felt too bright, like the world was pretending nothing had changed. I woke up alone again, though technically Evan hadn't moved out. His clothes were still in the closet, his shoes lined neatly near the door. But the man who used to fill those spaces was gone. I tried to tell myself it was a phase, that silence was just his version of cooling off. Yet every day it felt more like absence wearing a polite disguise. Tessa called around 10. She said she'd seen something online. I braced myself, assuming it was another meme. Instead, she said there was a rumor spreading at her office that Evan had gone to speak with someone professional. I asked what that meant. She said it could mean a lawyer. My stomach twisted. I told her that was ridiculous, that he wouldn't go that far. She said quietly, "You should talk to him before it's too late." Then she hung up. By noon, I'd talked myself into believing she was wrong. I spent hours cleaning, as if order could substitute for control. I folded laundry, wiped counters, even polished the toaster. I wanted him to come home to something soft and familiar. Around 3, I texted him, "Dinner tonight. We need to talk." The message stayed on delivered for hours. At 5, I decided I wasn't going to sit and wait anymore. I drove to his office. The parking lot was nearly empty, but his car was there. I waited outside for almost 20 minutes before he appeared, walking slowly, checking his phone. He didn't look surprised to see me. I asked why he hadn't answered. He said, "I didn't think you were asking a question." That irritated me instantly. I said, "You can't keep doing this, ignoring me like I'm some stranger." He said, "You made yourself public. Strangers have opinions now. I don't need to add mine." I followed him to his car, saying we could still fix this, that people overreacted because of the internet. He said, "It's not the internet I'm reacting to." I asked what he meant. He said nothing, just unlocked the door and told me he'd be home later. Watching him drive away, I felt small in a way I hadn't since high school, like I'd lost control of the scene entirely. That evening, Tessa stopped by with groceries. She said she didn't want me alone. I told her I wasn't fragile. She said, "You're performing again, even now." I wanted to yell at her, but my throat tightened. She made dinner while I scrolled through my phone, pretending to be bored instead of scared. Halfway through dinner, Evan walked in. The air went tense instantly. Tessa greeted him kindly. He nodded but didn't smile. I asked if we could talk privately. He said, "Whatever you have to say, you can say here." I hated that. I said it wasn't appropriate to air personal things in front of my sister. He said, "You didn't mind an audience before?" My hand tightened around the fork. I told him to stop bringing up the video. He said, "You still think this is about a video?" Tessa looked between us, uneasy. I said, "What do you want from me? An apology?" He said, "No, I just want honesty." I said I'd been honest all along. He said, "Not with yourself." Then he excused himself, took a plate to the sink, rinsed it, and went into the guest room. After he closed the door, I told Tessa he was trying to manipulate me. She said, "He's not even arguing. That's what's scaring you, isn't it?" I didn't answer. She left shortly after, hugging me tighter than usual. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the front door closing. Evan had left early again. On the counter was another sticky note. This time it said, "Don't forget the 4:00 appointment." I had no idea what appointment he meant. I checked my own calendar. Nothing. My chest felt tight. At work, things weren't better. HR called me in again, this time about conduct after resolution. Someone had reported that I'd been complaining about company gossip. I denied it, but I could tell they didn't believe me. The HR manager said, "Sometimes reputations need time to repair." I said, Mine doesn't need repair. She smiled like people do when they're done arguing but don't want to say it. By lunchtime, I wanted out of that building. I texted Kara to meet me at the cafe near the river. She arrived late, all energy and perfume, and said she'd heard from a mutual friend that Evan was talking to someone official. I told her that rumor needed to die. She said, then make him stop first. I said, how? She said, publicly. If you control the story, no one can use it against you. So I posted again. Another photo, another caption, something vague about new beginnings. Within an hour, comments rolled in, some supportive, some sarcastic. Then I noticed one from a coworker I barely knew. Guess it's not his beginning anymore. I deleted it, but the word stuck. That evening, when I walked into the apartment, Evan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I asked if he'd seen my post. He said yes. I asked what he thought. He said, I think you're addicted to witnesses. I told him that wasn't fair. He said, neither was the laughter. I sat across from him, trying to look calm. I said we needed to fix this before it became irreversible. He looked at me for a long time, then said, it already is. I felt my throat go dry. I said, so that's it. You're just done. He said, no, I'm just finished arguing. Then he stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured himself water. I followed, saying he couldn't just shut down like that. He said, I can, and I have. When I went to bed that night, I could hear faint typing from the guest room again. I almost knocked on the door, but stopped myself. Something about the rhythm of the keystrokes made me realize he wasn't writing messages. He was recording, archiving, saving things. The next morning, there was a new entry on the fridge calendar, meeting, personal. The same neat handwriting, the same careful spacing. I touched the ink and felt a chill. That afternoon, Janine called. Evan's mother rarely phoned me. She said, he's calmer now, but you should prepare yourself. I asked for what? She said, for him to be fair, not kind. Her tone wasn't cruel, just factual. I asked if she knew what he was doing. She said, he's doing it properly. That word, properly, echoed in my head the rest of the day. When I came home, the guest room door was open, the files were gone. The desk was bare except for a single folder labeled Archive B. Inside were only blank sheets. For a moment, I wondered if he'd left them there to taunt me, to make me question what he'd already taken. Later that night, I tried calling him. He didn't answer. Around 10, I heard the lock click, the door opening quietly. He walked in, expressionless, placed his keys on the counter, and said, we'll talk soon, I promise. I asked when. He said, when it's official. I didn't know what that meant, but his calm terrified me more than anger ever could. The next morning, I checked his phone charger. Gone. The closet looked even emptier. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through our old photos, forcing myself to believe the girl smiling in them still existed somewhere. By evening, the apartment felt foreign. His scent was fading. Even the air felt thinner. I called Tessa again, but she didn't pick up. I texted Kara, who said she'd seen someone matching Evan's description near the courthouse downtown. I laughed it off, but my fingers shook as I typed. Around midnight, I opened the balcony door to clear my head. The city lights looked harsh, unforgiving. Inside, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a screenshot of my own post from that morning, the one about new beginnings, with a short reply underneath, agreed. ER. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. For the first time, I felt it clearly. The shift from rumor to consequence. I had wanted to control the story, but I'd forgotten one thing. He was writing his version too. Quietly, carefully, and he hadn't needed an audience to make it real. By the next week, I'd stopped pretending things were normal. There was no pretending left to do. Evan moved like a ghost through the apartment, calm, methodical, polite to the point of cruelty. Every time he spoke, it was in short, precise sentences, the kind that left no room for emotion. I thought silence was punishment before. Now I saw it was armor. I tried to fight back in small ways. I texted him things like, "We can still fix this and I love you, even if you hate me right now." He never replied. Sometimes I'd hear the faint vibration of his phone on the counter, proof he saw my messages, but he wouldn't even glance at the screen. At work, whispers followed me down the hall. Someone had leaked the HR notes, or maybe they were just guessing. Either way, everyone knew Jared was gone and I was the reason. I caught one of the interns mimicking the video pose behind my back, laughing with another girl. I almost said something, but what was left to defend? I'd built the joke myself. When I got home that night, the apartment smelled faintly of paper and toner again. I found him in the guest room, scanning something. I asked what it was. He said, "Just paperwork." I asked what kind. He said, "The kind that needs to be done properly." The word properly landed like a bruise. I told him he was being dramatic. He said, "You said that last time, and it didn't age well." I wanted to scream, to make him stop speaking in riddles, but my throat felt heavy. I just muttered that I couldn't live like this anymore. He looked up and said, "You won't have to." I didn't sleep that night. Around 2 a.m., I heard the soft hum of the shredder again, followed by a faint click. The sound of the locked drawer closing. The next morning, he left before dawn. When I checked the kitchen, his mug was gone completely. For the first time in weeks, only one cup sat on the counter, mine, half full of stale coffee. I stared at it for a long time, realizing how permanent emptiness can look. Tessa called around 9. She said Evan had been at their parents' house the night before. My chest tightened. I asked what he said. She hesitated, then told me he'd spoken calmly, like someone closing a chapter. She said he mentioned sorting the household. I told her she was taking his side again. She said, "Mariel, there's no side anymore. There's just consequence." At noon, Cara sent me a screenshot. Someone had posted in our office group chat a photo of me at last month's karaoke night, the same one that caused all the chaos. Only this time, someone had captioned it, "Wonder if she'll smile like that in court." I laughed out loud, because the alternative was crying. When I got home, he was there, standing by the window, holding his phone like he'd been waiting. I asked if we could finally talk. He said yes. I almost relaxed until I noticed a small envelope on the table beside him. He said, "I've been patient." I said, "You've been distant." He said, "That's what patience looks like when it's over." I told him he was scaring me. He said, "No, I'm giving you clarity." I walked closer, asking if he was really ending things over a misunderstanding. He said, "It stopped being a misunderstanding when you started performing it." I told him he couldn't just erase 4 years like that. He said, "I'm not erasing anything, I'm documenting." He picked up the envelope, tapped it once against his palm, and set it back down. I didn't ask what was inside. I already knew I wouldn't want to hear the answer. Then he said something that froze me. "I'll handle it properly." His tone wasn't angry, it was final, like a judge announcing a sentence no one could appeal. I told him that if he walked out, he'd regret it. He said, "You keep thinking regret is something you can assign to other people." Then he grabbed his keys and left. When the door shut, the quiet was absolute. I sat at the table for nearly an hour, staring at the envelope. It wasn't sealed. Inside were receipts, copies of emails, screenshots printed and stapled neatly in order, photos of my public posts, my captions, even one of the memes. The top page had my name in bold letters, my own handwriting from an office document. Every word I'd ever said to make myself look innocent now looked like evidence against me. I called Tessa, but she didn't answer. I texted Cara, asking what I should do. She said, "Maybe apologize publicly before he does." I told her I wouldn't give people the satisfaction. That evening, I found his drawer empty. The folders, Archive A, Archive B were gone. The USB was gone too. I opened the closet. Half the hangers were bare. The air smelled faintly of his cologne, fading. I sat on the floor, knees pulled up, scrolling through old videos on my phone. There we were at the lake again, his arm around me that time, my laugh genuine. I tried to remember what that version of us had felt like, but it was like trying to feel sunlight through glass. The next morning, Janine texted me. Just one line. "He's doing it properly, Mariel. You should prepare yourself." I threw the phone onto the couch and stared at the wall until the room blurred. I didn't want to believe her, but every small detail pointed the same way. The blank folders, the printer noise, the calm. When night came, I sat in the dark waiting for the sound of his key. It never came, only the fridge hum and the faint tick of the wall clock. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m., then 2. At 3, I heard a car door outside. I ran to the window, but it was just a delivery van. Still, my pulse wouldn't slow. I couldn't tell if I wanted him to come back or if I just needed the waiting to end. By dawn, I finally stopped pretending. He wasn't coming home. He hadn't slammed the door, hadn't shouted, hadn't cursed. He'd simply finished the story the way he always did, quietly, neatly, properly. I told myself he'd regret it someday, that people would see how cold he was, how unfair. But deep down, even as I spoke the words aloud, they sounded weak. Because I'd built this, brick by brick, laugh by laugh, until the house had no walls left to hold him. When the sun came up, I realized the envelope was still on the table. I opened it again and stared at the neat rows of paper. The last page was blank except for one line in his handwriting. Foreclosure, not revenge. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did neither. I just sat there, waiting for the next sound, the sound that would tell me what properly really meant. The lobby was crowded, voices echoing off marble walls. I spotted Evan near the security desk, calm as ever, holding a folder. When he saw me, he didn't flinch, just nodded toward a man beside him. The man stepped forward and handed me a sealed envelope. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The heading was clear: Petition for Dissolution and Property Division. Filed today. Cameras flashed somewhere behind me. Evan thanked the clerk, turned, and walked out into the sunlight without looking back.